Greetings, salutations, and welcome to Sportslook, the sports television program for the high plains of West Texas and eastern New Mexico. I'm your host, Doc Elder, and this week we're going to finish up a process that we started last week of interviewing spring sport coaches. And as such, we're going to have Jeff Cavalunas, the head coach of Greyhound Track and Field. We're going to have Albert Flynn, the head coach of Greyhound Rodeo. I'll finish up with an overtime, but as always, I'll start out with an Eastern recap. A rarity for Greyhound men's and women's basketball in that they did not have games last Saturday. They will have games this Saturday at home against Western New Mexico. For the Greyhound softball team, they won their first game of their weekend series out in Arizona. For the Greyhound baseball team, they won their last game of the weekend series against Adams State. And the winning pitcher for the Greyhounds, the pride of Texaco, New Mexico, Dalton Thatcher. Well, that has been your Eastern recap, so we'll clear this out and we'll bring in our first guest, Jeff Cavalunas, right now. Welcome back to Sportslook, and we welcome back to the set of Sportslook the head coach of Greyhound Cross Country and Track and Field, Jeff Cavalunas. And Coach, welcome back to Sportslook.
Thank you, man. It's great to be back.
Well, Coach, we haven't had a chance to talk to you since the end of the cross country season, and congratulations on just a great fall season.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it went well, man. I had a great group of kids, and they really, competed hard for that conference championships. As any coach, we want to maybe finish, one or two notches higher, but, they did put everything into it and ran well and still had a lot of success with some individual accolades coming out of it.
And of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't address the fact that also cross country suffered a tragedy with one of your runners tragically losing his life. And so our condolences.
Yeah, well, thank you. That was, kind of a rough start there and losing Sylvester, just, kind of crazy and never know what happens. But, the athletes, were able to handle it pretty well. And I think everybody's really kind of coming back around. But yeah, it was a rough start to the year there.
But let's go back and talk about the positives. You had some young ladies that ran exceptionally well, and you had a guy that really seemed to impress the Lone Star Conference.
Yeah, I mean, so far, we had the 4 regular season indoor meets. Really a couple up at University of New Mexico and a couple over at Texas Tech, and had some kids running well. Yeah, on the men's side, Kelvin Kemboy really had an impressive 5,000. A couple weeks ago. We got to get some qualifying marks under our belts for the Lone Star meet, and we got him in that first 5K, and he really ran well. A number 2 all-time performance for the Greyhounds here, and on the men's side, that's saying a lot with the history of men's track and field here. So he's done really well, and again, on the distance side for our women, very similar. We had a great couple of meets there and a lot of personal bests, and the ladies really on the mile and 3K and 5K move up and put themselves in some good positions going into the conference championships this week. Mary Seema's sitting kind of right up at the top in that 800, and she's a defending outdoor champion in that event, and is poised to really go back and compete for that individual title again, in those running events.
So talk a little bit about, for people that may only be casually acquainted with the fact that there is track and field, not might understand that there is an indoor part of the season and an outdoor part of the season. What are the big differences between the indoor events and the outdoor events?
Again, for us, indoor season, is indoors. So the competitions are indoors. Some of the events are a little bit shorter. So, we're just running a 60-meter dash instead of 100, and part of that's facility size. You really can't fit a 100-meter sprint in there. So there are a few variations. Indoors, we have what's the 20-pound weight throw, or the men's version of 35-pound weight throw, along with the shot. So, again, because of facilities, there's no javelin or discus or hammer throw. The distance events, we're just limited to 5,000 meters at the longest, instead of 10,000 meters. So for us, we continue, we train outside every day, weather permitting this time of year. But when we compete, they'll be indoors and they're typically, 200-meter banked tracks. A few are 300 meters. So, a little bit shorter tracks, more laps for some athletes. And, then there's the conversion factors between 200 and 300-meter tracks. So we get equal performances. Then as we moved to outdoor season, mid to late March, again, all the meets are back to what people are more familiar with, the 400-meter tracks outdoors.
So it's safe to say that in the indoor track and field championships and Lone Star Conference, because there are fewer events, that puts more emphasis on the few events that do take place.
Yeah. you know, um, for us, I think that can be an advantage. We don't have some of the depth some of the other programs do, so we can come in and be strong in a fewer events. With only 2 throwing events, we got somebody like Tamia Smith, who's doing very well, can be very competitive in both those events. Not getting spread out over 3 or 4 events, and that's kind of an advantage to us. We're very strong in the middle distance events. So with a 800 meters, mile, a distance medley relay, and 4x400 meters, that's also, I think, an advantage for our program right now and where we're at, to be able to fill a lot of those spots in.
And you mentioned the name Tamia Smith, and I've got to point out that we have student athletes at Eastern New Mexico University. They're athletes, obviously, they're here on a scholarship, but they're students. And I just recently learned that Tamia is actually not only a great athlete, but she's involved in student government.
Yeah, she's involved in a lot of things. She's just an amazing, student athlete here. Vice president of student government. She's been involved with SAC. So really a great leader on campus. Has done some presentations to the campus body on different subjects. So she's an awesome young lady.
And I had the pleasure of actually having her as a student when she was a freshman. So I can speak to the fact
Yeah.
that she is definitely the student and student athlete.
Yeah.
Um, that's obviously something at a school like Eastern New Mexico University we like to point with pride. And it seems like student athletes at Eastern overperform compared to other schools in the Lone Star Conference.
Um, I think the student athletes here at Eastern do a tremendous job. We've on a regular basis, since I've been here, have led the Lone Star Conference in GPAs. Not just several of the teams, but also the whole athletic department, men's programs, women's programs. Um, and I think our coaches here do a fantastic job of helping our students be successful in the classroom and helping guide them. And I think that's really shown on team GPAs and number of athletes on the Lone Star Conference, honor roll for academics. So I think they do a fantastic job here and really represent and kind of at the top cream of the crop of this Lone Star Conference academically.
Well, Jeff, let's say a little bit more on the 30,000 view of athletics rather than the 3-foot view. Things have changed since you became a head coach here. New athletic director, new president of the university. And what can you say about your working relationship with your new boss on one side of the highway and your new boss on the other side?
It's gone great. You know, President Caldwell, I think, has been very receptive of listening to, a coach, listening to the athletes and really getting an idea and learning about athletics also, in her transition. And, I think, she's been there for us. Dr. Weir came in the summer and, again, is also kind of getting his feet wet, right? Learning how things work here and kind of getting to know the coaches and the athletes and figuring out how to support, everyone here, and how he can make, this athletic department, this campus and this university better. So, big learning curve, but again, very supportive people here, of not only what I'm doing with our programs and our student athletes, but I think the athletic program. And I think the future is very bright here in athletics.
And of course,
I think we're going to continue to see some new things happening and new ideas and just some great things happening over the next couple of years here.
and a new person in charge of the publicity for your program,
Yes.
Nicole Holcomb,
Yes.
took a position with Clovis Community College, and right now, a young man by the name of Cam Brennan filling in. And with
Yeah.
only a week under the belt, I think he's really hit the ground running.
He's doing great too. Intelligent young man that's really excited about this, and few sports are kind of new to him, as with anybody getting into athletics, a lot of different sports, but very supportive, very receptive, really does a great job and works hard at trying to get the word out and the publicity and get all the press releases and stats out and all the other things that go along with his area.
Well, let's go from 30,000 feet back down to 3 feet, and let's take a look at the here and now for Greyhound track and field. Conference championships looming on the horizon, and realistically, who would you have to say would be the favorite on the men's side, and who's the favorite on the women's side going in?
Again, coming in to the Lone Star Championships this weekend, West Texas A&M, again, two very strong programs, men and women's side. I think a lot of big opportunities after that. For us, I think, we're going to go in our men's side, a bit more competitive, and I think ready to score some more points than we were able to do the outdoor season. Again, I have a pretty strong group of middle distance men that'll come in and have some opportunities to score in the 400, 800, distance medley relay, 4x4 relay, and Calvin Kipkemboy in a good 3,000, 5,000 double. So, we have some work to do, getting our depth in the men's program back and getting them back up in the conference. On the women's side, again, you had the West, like I said, West Texas A&M, Angelo State's still pretty strong, a lot of depth in their program. But again, we're pretty strong, in our mid distance. Again, you look at our cross country programs; they're very competitive with all the other distance runners. So it'll be some pretty good competition. We throw in there some of our field events this year with Miss Smith in the throws, Ariana Hayden in the long jump and triple jump, Paige Graham in the pole vault. We're starting to bring back some more points in those field events. So we're going to go on and fight, and see how well we can do, how high we can finish.
And then, of course, a chance to qualify for nationals in indoors, and then you jump right into the outdoor part of the season.
So again, this weekend is the last weekend to get qualifying performance for the NCAA meet. So, we'll kind of see where some people are at. Ariane in the long jump, they had some opportunities. Mary Seaman, the 800, has some opportunities with some good races. And yeah, if we do that, we have the NCAA meet in 2 weeks, and usually we come back from the indoor NCAA meet and we're right in the outdoor season.
Well, Coach, congratulations on the success you've had in the indoor part of the season. Good luck in the indoor Lone Star Conference Championships, and best of luck in the outdoor.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, that is going to wrap up our first interview segment. So what we'll do is we'll clear the set and we'll bring in the head coach of rodeo, Albert Flynn, right now. Welcome back to Sportslook, and an honor and a privilege to bring back to the set of Sportslook the head coach of Greyhound Rodeo, Albert Flynn. And Coach, welcome back to Sportslook.
Thank you, sir.
Well, to bring people up to speed that may not really follow rodeo as closely as the diehard aficionados do, it's a split sport where you have some meets in the fall and you have some meets in the spring.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we've been to 5 in the fall, and we'll go to 5 in the spring, and we start Thursday in Odessa, Texas.
And how would you characterize the fall rodeos? Happy, not quite so happy, or somewhere in between?
Maybe somewhere in between, mainly because of the numbers that the girls have to compete against. In the breakaway roping, there was 200 contestants, and the barrel race, there was 150 and 70 some in the goat tie. The biggest difference between fall and spring is most of the fall rodeos are back to back to back. And if a person is on just tuned up and really everything working in their favor, it seems like every week it falls in place for them. In the spring, we go to one, it's 30 days before we go to another one. And then we skip a couple of weeks to go to the last two. So it's that break in between that breaks up that consistency that when a person really gets hot, as you would call it, uh, it's not that same way in the spring. And the girls that won so much in the fall, they may come back in the spring and not win anything, and another set of girls will win. But there's two or three of them girls gathered up a lot of points in the fall that they've probably already made it to Casper for summertime.
Well, Coach, I've known you for years, and it's never occurred to me to ask this question, but why is that? Why are they bunched up like that in the fall and spread out like that in the spring?
It has to do with the weather. We start early we start in September, October. When November comes, uh, then the weather changes and it's hard to, and then in the spring, you have a little bit more time, April and March and April. And then, of course, Odessa's always been in February. And then we go to two in March and two more in April. And it's just the timing and the length of your season is more accommodating.
Well, I can imagine that if you're going to try and pick a place to have a rodeo in February, Odessa, Texas, usually probably not a bad choice.
Well, it's indoors, not a bad choice, but there is times that the ice creates there in February in Odessa. That hasn't happened the last 4 years, but one day that ice storm in Texas will come by there in late February, and then that's the day we dread going. But it'll be indoors, and when we start in March, the first one, the second one, they'll both be indoors, and then the fourth one we go to is outdoors, and the last one's indoors. So uh, it's not a bad situation.
Well, it seems to me that indoors would be the optimal. Is there really any disadvantage to having an indoor rodeo?
The arenas are smaller as compared to when we go to Big Springs, and it's in a big long arena, and they score cattle out there a little further, and the goat tie-in's 120 or 30 feet long from the score to the goat, but in the buildings it's a little short distance to the goat, so uh, that's the biggest difference.
Probably a little expensive to build an indoor arena and have it the dimensions of a place like Big Spring.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Not a lot of schools have the deep pockets to be able to do that.
No, no.
Well, Coach, coming out of the fall season, who were your individual performers that had the most points accumulated?
It's kind of toss up between Stacey Moore and Madeline Sowers. Uh, at probably three of the five rodeos, Stacey had made the short round in two events. And then at Tech, the last rodeo, Madeline won the all around and placed in two events. And if the two of them can place at the same time in two events, it makes a big difference for our team points.
And how about for the guys? Who was the most pleasant surprise for you in the fall?
Trent Wood, right here at the first rodeo, a freshman boy, placed in the calf rope, and a small boy, but the cattle get a little bigger. It's a little tougher for him to get him on the ground quick enough to win, but he ropes good, and he'll as he seasons go by, he'll get better and be all right. Uh, and then the young man from Canada, um, Coy McBride, he's a team roper and he's got a different partner for the spring, and we think they'll do okay. So
And for people that may not be familiar, how does that process work? How do you get a teammate in that particular sport?
It's kind of individual preferences, who they rope with or who they feel like they rope better behind or in front of. Uh, they don't, they come from different schools. Uh, Trent has a boy that's going to school in Ranger and ropes with, and Coy roped with a boy from Hobbs this spring, and they're both good kids, and but and then there's some girls that are roping together here in Stacey and Madeline. They rope together, and but it's just competitive uh, team roping, and it's not like when they go to a team roping and they get to run four head and average is a little softer, but they've got to be 6 seconds on the long run, and in the short round they can be anything if they can just be clean because there's only 10 of them they got to beat, so the odds are more in their favor.
Yeah, it's funny. I think back to the success that Eastern has had in team roping, and I think back to a kid like Mike Trujillo, who was a local kid and
Right.
became a national champ. And it never occurred to me while I had him in Portales to ask him that question. Mike, what was it that you saw in your teammates?
Yeah. And him and Chance, they win as freshmen. They win the world, and then as a senior, he roped with Katie too, and they win third at nationals. And uh, Katie too was in the region for 4 years and had a different partner every semester because she was a girl and nobody thought they could rope behind her and win. And she got herself to Casper, and luckily those two got matched up and worked out good for Michael.
Well, looking at the spring semester of rodeo, obviously we want to finish as a team in the top three in the region. Individuals want to finish in the top three. And who, as far as the team goes, is really your big competition in men's rodeo, and who's your big competition in women's rodeo?
Well, in the women's, it's right now it's Tech and Weatherford and South Plains and Tarleton. In the men's, it's Clarendon and Snyder and Tarleton. Sul Ross fits in there depending on what some of them are doing, but uh, in the men's, Clarendon has been pretty on the top for the last 3 years, and of course they had a young man that win the all around and at Casper this year and helped them win the national title. And then that boy went on to NFR and finished third in the world as a rookie. And so uh, they just have bronc riders and bareback riders, and that's what it takes to win the region.
We talked earlier about Trent Wood and the fact that he's a relatively young man, and of course, a kid from right here in the local area. I How much can you project improvement? How much can you look at a kid like Trent and say, okay, if you're this good as a freshman, you can be this good as a senior, and how much of it is just how badly they want to improve?
For him, it's going to depend on what kind of horsepower he gets under him. He's got a nice horse, but it's kind of small horse too, and uh, maybe needs to step up to just a little stronger horse to get a little more help flanking cattle. He has the hands that's quick enough. It's just a matter of technique and flanking and getting them on the ground. And that's, he ropes good, gets loose from his horses really well. It's just a matter of when he gets there, he needs to be able to pick them up and get them on the ground. And that horse taking a step back strong when he gets there is what helps them little guys get by. And so that's pretty much where he's at.
Well, Coach, congratulations on the success that you've had as the head coach at Eastern. Congratulations on the success you had in the fall. Best of luck in the spring, and let's hope that we can bring you back on and talk about some kids that are taking a trip to Wyoming.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, that is going to wrap up the interview segment of Sportslook. So, what we'll do is we'll clear the set and I'll finish up with an overtime right now. Since President's Day was just a couple of days ago, I'm going to do my overtime about a president. Am I going to talk about Gerald Ford, who is an All American football player at the University of Michigan? Am I going to talk about George Bush the first, who was a first baseman for Yale? No, I'm going to talk about our president, Dr. Patrice Caldwell. I don't know how much you remember about when she became president of the university, but quite frankly, our athletics programs were in a state of disarray. We had lost our athletic director. We had numerous head coaches that resigned. We had a sport that had been put on hiatus, and we were dealing with the tragedy of COVID. And Dr. Caldwell had to keep everything running. And she did. She got us through the pandemic. She got an athletic director hired, got new head coaches hired. And that sport that was put on hiatus, men's soccer, is going to be coming back. But just like Franklin Roosevelt, who didn't live to see the end of the Second World War, and Abraham Lincoln, who didn't live to see the end of the Civil War, she's not quite going to be the president long enough to see us get back to national prominence. But fortunately, not because she's going to pass away, just simply because she's going to retire. So, Dr. Caldwell, thanks for being a great president. Well, that is going to wrap up in overtime, and that will wrap up an episode of Sports Look. I'd like to thank my guests, Jeff Cavalunas and Albert Flynn. I'd like to thank my floor crew. Once again, my director was Mr. Aiden. So, for those aforementioned people, this is Doc Elder saying, so long.